Great, so we can go ahead and come into order. We have a couple of folks who, well, we have somebody who'll be joining us late, and then John, I know, will be joining us late. So I wasn't sure, she's still virtual, yes? Yes. And then we have Lisa, who's virtual today. So yeah, let's go ahead and do roll call.
Alyssa Newsome,
Present.
Desiree Simmons,
Present.
Lisa Volker,
Present.
John Lusk, Tegwin John, Alice Elliott,
Present.
Steve Wilcoxon.
Present.
With 4 present, there's a quorum.
Great. All right, now we can go on to approving the agenda. So we'll have public comment in a second. We have a couple of discussion items. So the minutes talking about some potential benefits and then getting through the prioritization and criteria for the day. Proposed business adjournment. Is there anything anybody would like to add? Okay, so all in favor of the agenda?
To approve?
Aye.
Aye.
We need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, and then we have public comment. Do we have anyone for comment?
There's no one currently in the attendees list.
Great, so now we can jump right into discussion. So we have the minutes, which is in our packet. Does anybody have any change or anything to the minutes that we have? We move to approve the minutes. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and so then jumping into potential benefits. So there's some things that we had that we were going to dive deeper into and talk about more today. So I mean, we can kind of jump, we can go in the order that they're in, or any order. So whatever people want to start with.
I would suggest just starting with the AMI calculation because I feel like we're gonna be here for a while on that one, but, or maybe that means we should start with the ones that might take less time. I don't know.
I'm in favor of starting right with the AMI, but I definitely feel like that's the biggest conversation.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So I know I didn't look this up and I don't know if anybody else did, or had a better understanding about this, because I think at our last meeting, we started kind of getting a sense a little bit about, like in terms of different units at different percent AMI. But I was also just thinking that it probably would be good if we knew, if we already had a sense of what, when we talk about the Ypsilanti AMI, what that would, how that would reach, what that would look like in terms of that calculation. So like what percentage of the AMI would we need to be looking at to get closer to the IPSI one? So I don't know if anybody already knows that.
Isn't that like 50%? IPSI's is 50% of what the county. Is that what you're asking? Or?
Yeah, that is what I'm asking in terms of, so because we have, there's ones that are at 60%, right? And then some that are at 40%. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
But I feel like the amount, wait, hold on. So the amount for the ones that are at 40%, what is that based?
what's that based at?
What is that amount?
Oh.
How many units or?
No, just like, what is the amount? I'm just trying to,
That cost.
What's the rent amount? Is that the question?
yeah, what is the expected income? Like, what is 40% AMI?
40% AMI.
Mhm.
40% AMI, I actually have the income information here. Would range from $29,840 to, so that's for a 1-person household. And then these units would allow for up to a 4-person household because they're 3-bedroom units. That would go up to 42,600.
Okay, thank you.
And actually it probably would be a 5-person, and they say that, I don't have that information, but all that would probably go up to just a few more thousand, so 45,000 probably.
Mhm. Yeah, 39 or 40. So then a 40% would fall within then that amount, yeah. In terms of the individual.
40% of the washed off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, so that's helpful because that means that we don't have to look at necessarily, I mean, that doesn't mean we can't, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that we have to look at a percentage that's outside of what's already being proposed. And I think that there has been a conversation in terms of numbers of units and things of that sort at those different levels.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of like, only 10% of this development would be at 40% of their unit. So, I don't know, I'm curious, like, I was gonna say, what's stopping you from making more of them available at 40%, and the answer to that is probably some money and like the amount that you are able to make. And so I feel like it's hard for me to propose an amount of units that could be available at 40% AMI without actually knowing like how much you guys are able to negotiate on that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I know at the last meeting, so you gave Kyle, you kind of did a couple of things that looked at the pilot. And I know after that conversation, I had a question, and this might be a question more maybe for Joe, maybe Steve, which is, because I was trying to, I think once we get that where we're prioritizing, I was like, so what? Does the city get no money? What does that mean? So I'd like to hear a little bit in terms of thinking about for the pilot, what that means in terms of what that means for the city, in terms of thinking about still providing services into those areas, things of that sort.
So I can speak a little bit. Steve could step in at any point. The reason why there is a payment in lieu of taxes because there are city services that still have to be provided: police, fire, parks, roads. And so even though the roads in this development will be private and the trash pickup, that's another one, and recycling are all going to be privatized, there still is a cost to providing those services. And so that's why if this commission decided to recommend 0 pilot or 1 or 2%, that does drastically reduce the amount of services the city can provide based on the fact that the state has essentially hamstrung the city in, as far as revenues it can collect. And so the more revenue the city doesn't collect in, the more we spread out to all the other tax paying residents so that we can actually provide the services, which then makes our taxes higher, which then raises all the taxes. You're good with your book, so.
I was just curious to go with this line of questioning is like, what is for the proposed number of people that are going to be living in those units? What is the current breakdown in terms of the cost per person for that, and for that many people? What is the total cost of providing those services to the city? I don't have that number. I don't know that.
And we could do some rough calculations, but it's really hard. Actually, it's a lot easier to say what is our city budget and what do we collect in taxes, and so what is that? That's an easy number to come up with. But But, and I can actually do a little bit of digging while this meeting's happening and try to actually do that, but, you know, the way that the state is structured our taxes in the city, it's basically commercial businesses pay the most amount of taxes. Owner occupied, and commercial and rental properties pay the most amount of taxes. Single family and multifamily owner occupied residential pay far less. And then piloted communities pay even less. No, those are basically the three taxing areas that we get. There's also certain fees for services. That the city does get some revenue sharing from sales tax, but really, I'll actually take a look at tax dollars per resident. See what that actually comes on to.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm just curious, do we have, if I've missed it, do we have a number in terms of, is that what we were discussing, how much rent would be for each unit? Or is this a
We do
different
have that.
position entirely? Even
Yeah,
a.
that
oh, go ahead.
information's provided actually, well, it was provided at the back of the earlier packet. Just let me pull it up so I can give you the exact information.
Right.
Yeah, I had the unit prices, but I couldn't remember what the total income was.
You're asking about unit rents, is that what you're saying? What is a one bedroom rental?
One bedroom at 60% would be 1,118. One bedroom at 40% would be
Oh,
719.
sorry, could you
Oh,
slow down?
Sorry, yeah, I don't know why I spat all that out at once. One bedroom at 60% AMI would be 1,118. And one bedroom at 40% AMI would be 719. This is also on the website for this CDO. You go to the city's website for 945 Clark. That's where you can-
Just to be very clear, Kyle, that does include utilities, correct?
That include utilities.
Okay, and what was the 700?
That's the one bedroom, it's at 40%, 719.
Actually, sorry, when you say that includes utilities, we provide, so we will provide residents with an allowance for utilities. So rents are reduced by a certain amount, $60 a month or $80 a month, depending on the size of the unit, for them to be able to pay utilities.
So wait, that's an
Can I ask
addition
a question?
off of what it is? I'm sorry, what you just said just confused me, I'm sorry.
So
So if we say the number
So-
is this amount,
So the rents that are provided on the unit breakdown, those rents are the rents. And then there would be additional utility charges based on whatever the resident controlled utilities would be, which is typically electric and gas. So the utilities are not included in the rents take into account the fact that the residents have to pay additional utilities, but the rents that I gave, or that you have in that packet are the rents, not also utilities.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
Sorry. So you said that that residents get a rebated credit in order to help the cost of the utilities?
there's something called the utility allowance. So there are rents that are set for each of the income levels. And then depending on what utilities the residents will be responsible for, then the rents that are allowed to be charged are reduced by those utilities. So the numbers that the rent numbers that you're looking at assume residents pay gas and electric. And so the rents account for them having to separately pay gas and electric.
So they pay so the bills, they just pay those on their own.
Yes,
Mhm.
like a homeowner would, like a renter would in another community.
What
Okay,
is the
so they're
utility-
already estimated for that projection.
Correct.
Then what is the utility credit you spoke about?
What I was saying was utilities are factored into the rents that are being charged as far as the rent levels. So just think about payment for rent and payment for utilities. So the rent levels that are in the packet.
I don't know that I have that in the packet. Was
That
this,
was the first day.
Because this has all of, okay, I'm just, I mean, I know, I can look at, I know it was in a council packet or something, I just don't have that. I don't think.
And we can print out the first packet for this, I believe it's in there.
I think this is the one that has like the big one from March 3rd, is that our first meeting?
March.
Yeah. March 3rd. Okay, I mean, whatever, it's fine, it's just, it's like, if we're talking about the numbers, helpful.
We'll go with it. I didn't want to use a copy of the first time.
I mean, I have it, I just want to say, I do have it. This is the first pack,
Yeah, she's looking at the first packet and she doesn't see the units listed in there anywhere.
not the cost. Not the big, not like the rental cost, I see like I see the units, but not like
Okay,
the,
so yeah, I'm actually just curious now.
anyway, yeah, I just want to don't reprint, because this was a long pack, don't reprint the whole thing.
No, I believe that was in one of the memos that I wrote that's on the website. I'll make sure.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah, I remember it from the memo, I just don't have I can look it up, it's fine, all right.
Can I also ask a quick question? So personally, as a renter, I've lived in units that calculate rent, not rent, utility cost differently. One will calculate based on the building and split it between all residents, and some will do it for the unit. So which you recommend?
The plan here is that residents would sign up for gas and electric directly through like a UTE, so they just get billed for their usage.
So they just get billed for theirs.
Correct.
Okay, good. I've lived in other buildings and I've had people call when I worked at a previous job, and they were very baffled as to why their costs were going up while they weren't doing anything, because your building is getting split, so that's good to hear.
It also, that tends to promote, you know, more responsible utility usage too, if people are responsible for their own usage. So that's generally what we do.
Yeah.
All right, so what I think, kind of as we go around through that. Hello, welcome. We're just talking about, as you're kind of entering it, we're right now in the conversation about AMI calculation and kind of going through that breakdown a little bit. And we were just talking about also the pilot, the role that plays in terms of the city's services. And so what we're figuring out right now, we were trying to figure out whether the rent calculations that we see include utilities or not. And what we know, what I think is that the amounts that we're seeing that's on the website, and that's part of the calculation, does not include utility payments. It just was calculated to include that utilities, that they will be paying utilities and as a utility allowance. But the amount that we see is their rent, and then they would have utilities on top of that rent. Which I just want to name too, as we think about the AMI and like the idea of like the 30%, what like the cost, what makes a person cost burden of that 30%.
That's what I was about to calculate. That's what I was about ready to calculate. I was like, okay, if it's $719 a month, for example. And then you would include utilities, the cost of like Wi-Fi and any other non-maintenance, and you want to multiply that by 3, because ideally that's what somebody should be paying for housing. That really happens. So that's what I was.
No, great. No, please calculate. I was just going to say like that is that 30%, just that cost burden. So it includes both the rent or, you know, your mortgage plus utilities is included within that.
If we just went by rent and it was at the 40% level, someone would have to make $2,157. That's a month just to pay to not be cost burden. To not be cost burden, that would be minimum monthly. And let's say they work, I don't know, typical 40 hours a week. So wait, I need to do that. This is very simple math, so anybody else can do it as well. So that's divided by 4. So a person just to pay rent and not be cost encumbered, not including utilities, would need to make a minimum of $13.48 $13.48 an hour if they're working 40 hours a week. But it would be more than that because you would also, the cost of utilities and internet and any housing related costs would also have to be factored into that.
So I think I could add a little, well, to clarify on some of this, the income ranges that I just provided, the 29,840 for the 40%, that the way that the AMI is calculated, the way that the rents are calculated off the AMI takes into account rents and then assumed utilities as well, which is the idea of this utility allowance. So, and they take 30% of the income in the county at those rent levels. That's how HUD publishes all these income levels.
Oh.
So it uses that 30% metric.
But it's based on the county and not on.
It's based on Washtenaw County, correct? But that's, so the 30% numbers are what are the numbers that we just went over.
Okay.
And that does include utilities in that 30%. So in other words, these rents could be higher if we weren't providing utility.
Right. Okay.
So it's, I don't know if that adds any clarity, but that's the 30% is the metric that HUD uses when determining AMIs and the associated rents.
Okay. Yeah, it's just my knee-jerk reaction to the proposed cost of rent. If I'm understanding the cost of the one bedroom correctly, is even when I was making more than I do now, you know, $1,000 a month for a one bedroom, assuming I'm the only one living there. It's not super affordable, but I know this is meant to be more family housing. And is this cost of rent, this would be different for the senior?
The only difference between the rent for the seniors and for the family is that the family has 3-bedroom units, the senior does not. So the rents are the same otherwise. Rent level,
So,
the 60% rent's the same.
okay, so if a senior, somebody who's like, you know, whatever, 65 years old, they could, if it's at totally at 60%, it would be about that.
Correct.
These are also the rents that would be paid for by Section 8 vouchers.
Right,
And so the rents that Kyle's proposing at 60% AMI is what the rents are with a Section 8 voucher.
right.
So
And in that case, the tenant, the resident pays 30% of their income,
regardless of what they're.
regardless of what they're.
Right, I forgot about the voucher.
So that's true for 60% or for 40%, but not for 60%.
Say that again, sorry, I missed.
So at the 60% level, 60% of AMI, they're not eligible for vouchers. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what Joe's saying.
No.
What he's saying is that the voucher, in either instance, the rent, either the 60% or the 40% rent is what the voucher would make up the difference of between the tenant, between the, you know, residents, 30% of their income, whatever that rent is.
So but the voucher, anybody who has a voucher would be a 60% unit because that's what HUD makes the difference on.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but typically they do make up the difference on a 60%.
Okay, so if it was at 40%, would that still participate in the voucher? Does that
Well,
change?
I would say that they could, it would be most beneficial though for both, for frankly, the resident and the broader community to put vouchers on the 60% units because 40% units have lower rents. So there are more people who could,
So,
but somebody could apply a voucher to a 40% unit.
so, I don't know, I'm just trying to keep up here. So are we trying to set the amount for all the affordable income units, or are we saying like we could have some at 60% and some at 40%?
Well, that's, I mean, so if we look at this, they just sent there, that's the two levels that they currently have set.
Mhm.
And I wanted to also kind of talk about these, the kind of breakdowns, because I think I remember or wrote down that Kyle, you also had looked at some at like 50% as well from that last calculation, which would be adding another percentage units in here somewhere too. So, yeah, I think that's what they're currently set at. And now this is great because now we can see like what that means in terms of number of bedrooms, because that was my other question. I kind of have a hard time just kind of figuring out how many that means. And so, for instance, that 2 bedrooms, so like for the 1 bedroom, that's 719 at 40%, that what's being proposed is 2 of those within the development, right? It's 156 total units
So 2 of those, so all 2 out of 156 would be.
for the, yeah, that 1 bedroom. So I think that that's part of,
So
what-
I'm sorry, Des, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'll go for it.
You said, just to clarify, you said 2, that means 2 units are at that rate.
In the family unit, based on this, at 40% AMI, 1 bedroom, there are 2. For the seniors, there's 9.
Lisa, do you have the breakdown in front of you?
Yeah, I have it in the packet. I have it electronically. Actually, I have my hard copy here too.
The table, the unit mix affordability table?
Okay, thank you.
Just want to make sure you have it. 'Cause you helped
Yep.
us.
Yeah, I just think I just hadn't digested like the ratio, if it's,
Yeah. So, and I think it just, I guess part of it is also thinking about the mix of like what it means, like the family unit versus having, single bedrooms, because there's only 18 1-bedrooms in the development in that family unit, right? Most of them are 2 and 3 bedrooms. So, but if you look across here, so what we have is there are 16 total units that are at 40% AMI in this mix. And so one of my questions and thoughts when we were kind of going over that breakdown that you provided last week, and it might be good to kind of go over it again, because I kind of think that was probably toward the end of the meeting that we did that. And yeah, but that we might want to think about what that looks like in terms of increasing the number of units at that 40% AMI, because that's the one that is the area that matches with the IPSI AMI.
100% of it, Milani's area median income is 40% of the counties, if that phrasing that correctly.
Yeah. So if that's where we are, then I think that's what we would want to look at, and what that looks like in terms of that mix of numbers. And then how that impacts, what that looks like in terms of impacting the pilot. Because some of these numbers, and this is where, so Kyle, maybe can you just go over a little bit like what you had given that breakdown before, so we can hear it with these numbers in mind, and we can kind of think about how many units that means.
So the breakdown you're talking about is at the end of the last meeting, when we talked about a certain number of units that could be at 50% AMI or 40% AMI. Then there was a change in the pilot. Right? Yeah, okay. So and I can also give you a quick summary of the 50% rents if that's helpful, but if that's going to add confusion, we can just stick with 40s for now. Let me know what you prefer. But speaking on the 40% units, what I said during the last meeting was for every 20 units at 40% that would be added. So 20, that means 10 per development, if you will, like 10 of the family, 10 of the senior, or allocated however you want. But for every 20 units that get added, the pilot would need to increase by 3%. So instead of it being a 5% pilot, it would need to be a 2% pilot to get 20 more units at 40% of AMI. At the 50%, it was a little bit every 20 units increase the pilot 1%.
So every 20 units would increase the pilot 1%, you said, for the 40%?
For the 50%.
Oh, wait, 50%. Because you said, yeah, we'll go from 5 to 4 at 20.
Correct.
Can I just ask a quick question? And we don't have to get too far distracted on that. Is there any reason that the upper limit of bedrooms is like 3 bedrooms and there's no like 4 bedrooms? Because there are some areas that do that, so I'm just curious.
there isn't a specific limit. I can tell you that Mishta, the housing agency, I actually was trying to add some 3 bedrooms in the senior. And this, by the way, this breakdown that you see is a little bit old in that it does show some 3 bedrooms in the seniors. Since that time, we've changed it to only have 1s and 2s. They 3 bedrooms aren't typical in senior. Also, 4 bedrooms really aren't very typical in family apartments, though I'm trying to do them in certain areas. But in this instance, I was encouraged to stay at 3 bedrooms for the family and 2 bedrooms for the senior.
Was there any reason that they encouraged you to stay at the 3-bedroom?
It was a what they viewed as a marketability issue, saying that it'd be hard to find. There's sort of like art and science to this when dealing with state agencies and all the stakeholders, and in this one they felt strongly that I think because there's not a lot of precedent for the 4 bedrooms and the 3 bedrooms in other comparable apartment units, that they felt that was just outside of the realm of what was marketable.
So marketability is the biggest issue?
That was the concern of Mishta.
So is it marketability to stakeholders to invest or marketability to fill the unit?
Oh, marketability to fill the units.
That is so, because in my experience, I have run into so many families that are like, we really need a 4-bedroom. That is what our voucher is for, and we cannot find housing anywhere in the county whatsoever. So I'm just like,
So Mishta, the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority, sets very rigid rules. In some instances, they require over parking, which is not what we want. In some cases, the rules are quite bizarre, and they're set as a statewide, and they don't. They're required to use county figures. Their rules are allowed to be state driven, and Mishta hasn't had a permanent director. And I want to say 4 years, 3-4 years. And the director, there is one still waiting to get through HUD, but there is a new one who's going to be fantastic. But there's a lot of rigid, like I told you before, we can't put affordable housing on Water Street because Michigan said so. And so there's nothing we can do except for just comply with Michigan if we want to see low-income housing tax credits, the LIHTC model. There's like, they require very, very, very rigid specific things. And if you tell them, well, I don't want to do that, I want to do this, they say, well, then you don't get the money.
What I will say is that I was trying sort of within the constraints to provide as much larger family housing as we could here. It's uncommon to get even up 150. I mean, we're over a third of it is 3 bedrooms, so we're really trying to push that. And I know there's a lot of demand for that. So
yeah, that's just shocking that it's coming from this show. Like, do they understand that like this is an issue where people with larger families cannot find anywhere to live?
I have another question too about these mixes. I wanted to see like how with taking out the 3 bedrooms shifted the numbers for the senior housing, but then also if we're looking at adding these different, trying to add more units of affordability, do they have to be, is there like a certain kind of ratio or something that you have for like how it has to be spread across the different bedrooms?
yeah, I can answer both of those. So first of all, for the senior, where I took the 3 bedrooms out, all of the 3 bedrooms became 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
So it's, instead of there being 47 2 bedrooms, now there's 58. And on the 2 bedrooms, instead of there being that was 47 at 60. That number, the top one becomes 58, and then the 40%, the 5 becomes 6. And actually, I noticed one other issue when I did this before. That 6 would be a 7 because you have to, I would be rounding up here to do a full 10%. So that was just a typo in this little thing. But anyway, and then to answer your question about the sort of proportion of units at each bedroom type. what I've done so far and what I assumed when talking about these additional units was I've allocated the 40% units proportionately based on the percentage that each unit type is of the overall. So for example, there are 8, using the very first 1-bedroom column on the family, there are 18 total 1-bedrooms. So there's, I show the totals for each unit type. 10% of that is 1.8 units. You can't have 1.8 units, so we do 2. There are 78 2-bedrooms. 10% of that is, again, rounding up 8. They have to be exactly 63 bedrooms, so 10% is 6. So when I talked about adding another 20 units, they would follow those same proportionate percentages. So it's not like 21 bedrooms, for example, right? It goes across the spectrum.
Is that something that would need to continue in that round? Because I'm just wondering, because I'm just thinking about like, as we get into these like kind of nitty gritty, and I'm thinking, well, if like I would love to see more 1-bedrooms at that amount, because I know that's a population of folks that have a harder time finding housing and staying in housing. A lot of the people that I see moving are people who could very well be in a 1-bedroom affordable housing unit, but there's not very many of them.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about like what that could look like if some of that could be rebalanced in terms of some of those additional.
If the question is, could we potentially do sort of more heavily weight the lower rents, the more discounted rents to the 1-bedroom units or the smaller units? I think there's a way to do it. I'm gonna pull the Mishta card and say I'd have to talk with Mishta, because there is this idea of parity where housing finance agencies don't like to see an unequal representation of sort of unit mix or unit type getting either more or less affordability treatment than the others. But this is an instance where I'm not sure if they would. I can certainly find out. I just don't know the answer. I don't want to tell you now that that can be done and then come back and say, no, we can't, or that would cause some issue. But I'm open to finding out.
And what would be the for the 50%? What would be the assumed income for that?
If no, Joe, I actually don't have it here, but so I can look it up.
No, so if you go to
I have it.
MC Public,
You have it?
Well, for Washington County, 50% area income
yeah, I have that.
is for one person. For a household size of 1 would be $35,000 for $35,550 annually, or $2,963 monthly.
And that's for the county, right?
That's for Washington County, which is the data set that we're looking at.
So it would skew up for them.
Oh yeah, Ann Arbor pulls that radically in one direction.
Yeah, so that's not it too.
What is that for 4-person?
For a 4-person household, the annual income would be $45,700, and a monthly income of $3,808.
So that's still like, that's not that much. I mean, that's a little bit,
Like $10,000 more.
It's right. I mean, it's right
It's a-
between the 40 and the 60.
oh, well, yeah, that's what 50 is. But no, but I was just gonna say, it's just a little bit, like in terms of like the IPSI AMI, it's just a little bit of, so it's a little bit above that. But obviously closer than 60%, but, because I was just trying to think like if we wanted to do a mix of more 40 and 50%. So that would add another layer of income, another layer in between the 40 and 60.
So if I understand what you're saying, you'd like to create another tier have 60, 40, 60, 50, and 40. And then shift the proportions in the 1%, in the 1 bedroom. For those, so instead of having, say the numbers as they are for the 40%, shifting from the 60% 1 bedrooms into 40% 1 bedroom.
But here's what I'm saying, and I mean, I want to know what other people are thinking too, but this is what I'm thinking. So let's say, so you said 20 units, right? So let's say 10 units, 10 more units at 40%. What, and as opposed to that addition being in the same proportion here, maybe that would be flipping it so that of those 10 more units, a higher proportion of those 10 extra units would go in at 1 bedroom to be able to increase that number there at 40%. And then let's say another 10 units at 50% to give another threshold in between. So that we can have, so it kind of can maybe play with this pilot amount a little bit more. You know, so as opposed to having to go down 2% pilot, right? You know, so that's what I'm just trying to think about what that balance could look like.
So I kind of ran the numbers on the per population figure on how much it costs per resident of the city of Ypsilanti. So let y'all know the numbers I took about 12.5 million, which is our general fund tax value that the city gets in taxes. Divided that by 20,400, that's our population, that's 2020. And so realistically, it's about $650. I'm estimating upwards, obviously, it was 630 something, but at 650. With this unit count, and I kind of took for 1 bedrooms, 1 person, 2 bedrooms, 2 people, 3 bedrooms, 3 people, 570 people could be living here. And so the amount of taxes needed to generate the full range of services at this facility be $370,500. Did my back of the envelope math kind of make sense to people?
Wait, okay, so you're saying about $650 per person, but then you were saying, okay, so maybe about 570 people.
Total, if you just took the unit count and, because but obviously a lot of 1 bedrooms are gonna have 2 people in it, I didn't.
Yeah. No,
So
that's fine.
I determined that this complex can have 570 people living there. Yeah, total, and so 570 times 650 is 370,500.
To compare that with what we were talking about with market rate capture from the city. If this was a development at a market rate, we would get, for every $1 million of tax, the city would get $400,000.
Yes.
Annually from this. With the pilot as written now, it's $220,000 that we capture. Nothing would go to the county or the state or the school district.
No, but the school district would be made whole based on the per pupil calculation.
Right. So with it as written, there's enough. Well, no, at market value, we'd be covering that $650 per person.
Almost.
Well, if it's 370 and we're catching 400,000, then
we're almost there.
Yeah. So, but with the capture at the 5% pilot that we're talking about at 220,000, that leaves us $150,000 short per year to provide services for the people that live at that.
That's correct. However, that's not always apples and oranges. Like I said before,
You know,
because
there's
traffic
different
about-
proportions, but the rough calculation would be $150,000 short.
Yep.
To provide fire, police, plows, things like that.
And what level would that be?
And that's at its current. I mean, that's at currently with the 5%.
Oh, yeah, everything happens.
So then if we talk about lowering, that would just increase that gap, although, you know, as we're saying, it'd be different. I also wanted to just, I don't wanna jump from this, but I did, you know, so I'll come back to that, so. I don't know.
Well, this pilot is good, this pilot is a. When you said that, we would be, that would, is if we're lowering the pilot percentage, increasing the gap. The pilot is I'm sorry if this has been answered before, this is a one-time payment or an annual payment?
Annual,
Okay,
but what's
It's not an annual payment, so.
it's not an annual payment, no, but it's an annual, we owe you this.
They owe the city.
Yes, yeah. Some, you know. Okay, that makes sense. I hope it would be, okay.
Yeah, so no, it's an annual, anything you do to change the 5%, either raise it or lower it, changes the amount. Lincoln Avenue Capital pays the city.
Mhm.
and the numbers that we were just using, the 220,000 or the 400,000, those are annual dollars.
That they,
That's paid to the city.
Mhm.
In lieu of taxes.
Mhm. What do y'all think about the idea of what I was just proposing to like kind of explore more in terms of 10 more units at 40%, 10 at 50%. I'm just trying to get a sense of like how if this is resonating and we're like kind of thinking about what folks would want to see.
I'm into that, yeah. I don't wanna like, yank a bunch of money from the pilot or away from the city, I guess, and also want more, affordable houses.
Yeah, a lot of these numbers and calculations are going over my head, so I'm just trusting the words that my peers and the information I'm getting. So really my bottom line still is like, how can we get the most affordable units at the most affordable price?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just kind of, to be frank, kind of depressing to look at these numbers and being like, yeah, I can't afford to live in Miami based on these numbers. Like I'm living with a friend who has a set rate of rent for me, and otherwise I was priced out. I couldn't live here anymore. So looking at these numbers, I'm like low as possible for as many people as possible is just my bottom line. But I know that it's also, we have to balance that with being able to provide services to those people. We don't want them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just me creating emphasis, and as somebody who is currently dealing with their price out living.
Okay, for that. Yeah, it's hard, I mean,
I also understand that a lot of what the city and the developers can do, their hands are very tied by the state and federal level. So we're doing the best we can with what we have.
Can I ask a question of clarification really quick? Steve, can you repeat what you were saying about the services? I think I missed some of that, but I'm curious about
Sure.
playing with these numbers and how it does impact the services. If
Sure.
that's-
So Joe did a rough calculation, and what he did was he took the general fund for the city based on the taxes that we collect every year and divided that by the population of the city and came up with a value of $600 per person that is put into the general fund for services. So roughly that's what the current services cost each person, or the revenue that's generated by each person on an average basis. So with that, that's $370,000 a year that would be required to meet the services for the people that would be in these developments, right? And so on a market value development, we would capture about $400,000 a year. Is that correct?
That's my understanding based
I
on.
understand.
the city would collect 400,000.
Right. So with the pilot at 5% as stated, the capture was calculated to be $220,000. So there's $180,000 deficit between that. So that's what the difference is in terms of what the city would get out of this between market rate and between the 5% pilot that's proposed. At the $370,000 as the rough calculation, that means that at the pilot as it is now, that's $150,000 deficit each year for services to those people that would be living in those units.
At the current, what the developers have currently proposed.
Right, with the distribution of the units as stated on here and at the 5% pilot. So to me, I think that's $150,000 investment by the city based on other taxpayers to provide those services, right? So that's a burden on the other taxpayers that we need to take out of other budget items. We have to adjust our budget to account for $150,000 a year to provide those services to those folks. Now, some of those services wouldn't necessarily fall strictly on the city because Clark Road is a county road, right? So they would have to take care of some of the maintenance on that, and I wouldn't directly fall on the city. So you can take some of that out, but with the fire and police, this is going to be firmly in the city's budget, and so we'll have to somehow find an extra $150,000 to account for that, as stated. When we start talking about rearranging the proportions within the AMI percentages and within the distribution across the numbers of bedrooms, and if those, as Kyle was saying, is taking that number down from 5%, either with the additional 20 units being shifted to a different thing, it either drops to 3% or 4% to a 2% or pilot. That means that the deficit is going to be even higher. And so the city's going to have to cough up more money to provide those services for those people than the $150,000. I'm guessing that's going to be, at some point roughly double with that.
So it's gonna end up increasing tax rate for
everybody else, right?
I'd just be curious to know what that tax increase would be, because renters are already paying, taxes, and we're a very rent heavy city, so it's for me, it's like a matter of like, how can we get the revenue but offset in a way that's not alienating and burdening the population.
So
Go ahead, Lisa.
So Steve, just in terms of being curious about kind of gleaning from your experience and having been sort of at the table from the beginning of these conversations, then from your perspective, what is the biggest benefit of this development to the city of Ypsilanti?
Well, I look at it as, a lot of people have been talking for years about providing more affordable housing and how we do that and how we fund that. And so to me, I look at this and I say that's $150,000 investment by the city to increase the amount of affordable housing. And if we start talking about changing the ratios, the percent of AMI and the distribution of the 1 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms, then that investment gets higher. Then we have to come up with where we're gonna get that revenue. If we're not going to capture it in taxes on this property development, then where do we capture that money someplace else? And with the competing forces of people already saying that taxes are too high, and for the property owners that are renting them, they're passing that on to the renters as well. So that kind of shifts the burden from the people who are living in these units to the other renters who are living in probably units that are not as well made as this. And from Kyle's statements in the community meetings, that if you take down the rents in these things, the projected rents, then you take down the construction costs, and then you wind up with a lower quality unit. And we've got a lot of it already, right? So I'm not looking at that as a way to, even this out, because we've got a lot of cheap housing, and I'm not meaning, I mean cheaply built versus inexpensive.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the trade-off. When we start playing around with these numbers, that increases the amount of money that comes from other taxpayers. And
I was just gonna, Yeah, and I was just gonna say too, as we get into this, I think that's part of when looking at some of the different benefits to the city at large, or that could be both, or some of that too, I think comes into play. Like, I don't think it's all like an exact money, and then like also like, yeah, as we're saying, some of the different the costs aren't the same. So it sounds like so I heard, so trash and recycling on site is gonna be privatized, so the residents there will have their own trash and recycling picked up then?
So typically, and I'd ask you, Joe, typically the ownership pays, you know, monthly fee or whatever to have trash picked up multiple times per week. So that falls outside of the tax collection that the city would otherwise do. So we would be paying for that separately.
Yeah, so the city has a, and I think you actually brought up, it's Ray, an earlier thing where we're trying to increase our multifamily recycling, but to a 300 unit. We would not have the capacity to do that. Well, according to our DPS, I kind of sometimes speak on behalf of the city, even though that's not my department, right? But I know that we have had a lot of people that have requested large scale multifamily recycling. They don't have the ability to do that at this point. I know they're trying.
Okay, so it's not that this would be something in addition, so it's not like they would be having access to recycling because they would fall outside of what the city would provide. Okay, I just wanted to make that, I just wanted to have that clarity, because that's one of the things I was thinking about was, you know, what it would be to think about like something, how that could happen within that space.
But on the flip side to that, every commercial building and every large scale landlord like River Rain or River Drive or any actual market rate housing also pays for their own trash pickup. Most of our restaurants pay for their own trash pickup, and they still pay taxes into the trash. So by the commercial entities paying the taxes, they subsidize all of our trash unless you live in a building over 4 units. So there is a little bit of that.
Right, so it's also something to remember is that every year, the city's trash pickup is subsidized to about $200,000 from the general. So the line items for trash pickup is always short, and we always transfer money out of the general fund to the state.
And I know I wasn't asked, I would say the one thing that, the one huge benefit that this development is that is not like anywhere else in the state that can be, is this will be a rent controlled development. So even though the rents are higher than we typically think of as what Ipsy is paying, the rents in Ipsy are going up because of lack of inventory. And so this actually controls this development, these 300 units, they can only go up the maximum cost of living that HUD sets every year, like for the duration of this. And so even though they are higher right now, we have seen an explosion in rent prices in the city. And because the state does not allow the city to enact any sort of rent control, this is the only way that the city can enact rent control.
Yeah,
Currently, until we change the law.
yeah, because the biggest thing is, it's the way that I am conceptualizing it, it's a counterweight issue. The bigger the gap gets, the more taxes have to increase or other revenue has to be explored to do that. And the more taxes go up, the more landlords will justify increasing rent costs. And so our battle here isn't necessarily with each other, it's just that the prices are going up and there's no way to control it right now. And the more that we allow tax prices to go up, the more that they will have justification, quote unquote, to increase the cost of rent for everybody that they mention.
So I just want to say that Jeremy Bronfman is the CEO of Lincoln Avenue Capital, and he's a literal billionaire. And so it feels very frustrating to me to be nitpicking over all of these various numbers and figures and having to wring our hands at where the money from this already heavily stressed city will come from, and we can literally just tax the CEOs like Jeremy Bronfman and fund all of this very easily, but that's all. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, it's just that once you tax
Mm.
people, they're like, okay, I'm gonna move somewhere where they aren't taxing, and then you lose your. tax.
Oh, no, I'm not, I mean, like.
I mean, I'm guessing this person doesn't live here anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's just frustrating because it's not within the purview of this meeting or next meeting. It's something we can't do anything about.
Yep, I'm just mad about it.
I mean, I think it's good to be, I mean, it's definitely frustrating, and I think this process is like only one step, like to try to like right size some of that in these different spaces. So
Yeah,
I appreciate like naming that, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's illuminating to when we go back to other people and we're talking about what can be done about rent. They're like, why didn't you try and get even more cheaper units and this and that? Yeah,
Because now we know why.
yeah.
Can I, another question on this, just again for clarity, and is when we were talking about these, the unit increases, and we were talking, so in the family unit, does that mean that, so if we change there, does that mean it also has to be in the senior housing as well, or no?
No, not necessarily. Again, the numbers that I ran were just assuming that they were split evenly, but if the committee feels strongly about addressing one more than the other, we can talk about that.
Okay, I don't know what you all feel, because my proposal was thinking about in one space, I was thinking about in the family units, primarily 20 unit, like increasing that. But I don't know if y'all have thoughts in terms of how that would, whether it's just split, because I just was doing 10 units at 40 and then 10 at 50. So I don't know. And I don't know if there's other questions about AMI before we move to the next area.
Do we know if the more of the renters in the city are like what people need? Do we it sounded from what Alyssa was saying, like there are a lot more families that need bigger units than smaller units. And so maybe that would be good to increase if we can versus single bedroom or 2-bedroom units.
Well, I'll just say, I know from when we had done, this was a couple of years ago, but when we did the housing affordability for accessibility work, that's why I was saying, like, what are the, yes, I think that there's a lot of family need, but I think that there's a lot more, but what I heard was that there's not a lot for people who are looking to be in like
Right. So
single 1-bedroom housing that's affordable, and that was a big gap. So that's something that came up from that. That's why I was just naming that as like wanting to see some more housing at 40% that's 1 bedroom. At that. I think that these would still increase ones that would be at 3 bedroom, increase more there too. But I mean, it doesn't have to, we don't have to flip it. That was just my suggestion because that's something that I've heard from folks.
That's been true in my experience of looking for housing, of there being hardly any one bedroom units available on the market.
yeah, it's pretty much impossible to have a 1-bedroom unit unless you're making like minimum $30,000 or $40,000 a year. Otherwise, you have to get a multiple and get what's that?
That's why I'm always surprised that there's so few.
Yeah, okay,
Because
so
there's like, who's making this kind of.
just to illustrate the big picture here, I'm in explaining area discussion, as are many. So I'm looking at the comments here. This is a 1-bedroom renter I know that has a unit. Mine is going up from 1040 to 1235. This person said mine started at 1037. Last year they bumped it up to 1184. Now it's going to be 1364. Mine went from 700 to 825. And you're saying this is really the only way that we can do it. Landlord went from 575 to 975,
Yep.
600 to 1200 people on fixed income. So like I look at these numbers
Yeah, these
and I'm like,
increases
these numbers are high, but now if it stays at that amount for at least 5 years, that's still.
I mean, the increases I've been seeing people talk about is, it's mind boggling. So
Yeah, my boyfriend's currently moving 2 hours away from me because he just can't live here anymore. And I have a number of friends that are just moving out, and a lot of them have a need for a 1-bedroom unit because there's just no way of splitting that rent with roommates. You know, if you get a 2-bedroom for $1,000, you can split that in half. But if you're an individual who lives by yourself for whatever reason, especially individuals with disabilities often need that. If it's not like 700, okay, at least that's better than 1,300 that we're looking at.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of, to go off your point, a lot of the 2 and 3 bedroom units will go to people with vouchers. And so that 30% will be taken care of in a different, completely different model. I am wondering, just listening to the conversation between Desiree and Melissa, and tell you what is, do you change the calculation to take away some of the senior affordability from the 40% and put it into the family? Is that a way to get more of the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom family? I don't know.
Lisa, do you have your hand up?
I do, yeah. That question made me wonder about accessibility of the units in terms of like, are they all, what is the standard for handicap accessibility?
The standard for handicap accessibility is that every unit, and I'm gonna get the terms wrong, I apologize about this, there's fully accessible and then there's adaptable.
Mhm.
Adaptable, which is where you can make modifications to, so that it can be fully accessible. I believe every unit has to be adaptable, but we start with, it's a small percentage.
Right.
3 or 3% or something like that is fully accessible from the beginning, and that's
And
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna tell Lisa also, if a unit isn't accessible and a resident, and the property is receiving Section 8 funding, if an accessible arrangement needs to be made, from my understanding, it does not fall on that resident because of the way that, like, if you're accepting it, so if a resident needs grab
Modifications.
power, then that's the responsibility of the property manager, the developer, whatever, to do that. So
Mhm.
that there's at least that, that if.
'Cause that's, yeah,
Adaptability versus like accessibility might be, as an example, like the distance between, like distances between, like, you know, if there was an island in like the counter or something like
Yeah.
that. You know, a certain amount of, an extended amount of space to have room for things like wheelchairs or walkers or things like that.
I think it would be great if there, I mean, I don't know how realistic it is, but as a benefit, if those existing already ready to go could increase as well. I'm sure that they're under assessed in terms of need.
I have a question. Is there anybody here at this meeting who works at the Ypsilanti Housing Commission?
No,
No.
there's only 2 people that actually work for the housing commission directly.
Is it possible that we could request that one of them might come to one of these meetings? To answer questions about the Section 8 stock that exists right now in the city, so that we can have a better understanding of where that is. And part of me is really interested in having more of these 1-bedroom family units, because that is a huge need that we have in the city, and at the same time, looking at the way that the population in the country overall is going to be changing, there's, you know, can't build, like, now is the time to be building affordable senior housing, to be there to serve that need. So that call, which I think is one that I'm interested in landing on, maybe at our next meeting. It's possible to have somebody from the housing commission come.
It can, the only thing I would caution you on is they only handle one very small
Mhm.
part of our affordable housing.
Right.
I would actually, to just be very blunt, I am actually probably the best person to actually pull that data and bring you all of our charts based on my role as the head of the building department that inspects all of these units. And so we know where the affordable units are, where the places that, like I said, vouchers are. We actually have a pretty good understanding of even the housing commission units. We can bring Zach Foster right here if he's available. We'll join director there, but Zach Foster, who's the executive director of the housing commission, only handles the
Yeah.
strong future limited and New Park Bridge and Hamilton Crossing, whereas there are other affordable developments.
Okay.
So I think we could probably get a sense of that, and I also would think too, because we also have some coming online, it's the one that's at Washington, right? Like that's coming on, and that's gonna be more senior affordable housing.
That's just regular.
Oh, that's regular now, okay, okay.
That's but that's like Avalon, so it's first, what is their model housing?
Yeah.
first?
Mhm.
So it's, those are the,
Okay.
very low.
No, and I would say like to like what Ted was saying and to your thing about like moving, like I would still want to keep affordable housing within the senior development too, because I do think that that is, that it's important, so.
So one thing I want to add to this discussion is that when we start talking about vouchers and people who qualify for the voucher, that is not going to be just people from Ypsilanti. As soon as these go on the market, we'll get applications
Yeah.
from all over the region.
Mhm.
And I look at the affordable housing issue as a regional issue, not something that the city of Ypsilanti can solve for everybody else. And they are going to put out there that we already do more than Ann Arbor does for affordable housing. We're disproportionately solving that problem for the rest of the area. And so when I look at that and I say, you know, we're going to have an influx of people from outside of the city.
Mhm.
If these go live, we will have those people that are talking about their rents going up are not going to be the people served.
Yeah, no, they can't. A lot of them aren't eligible. for
And
it.
there's other developments as well. And so people that make more in the mid-range of income, like the 220 North Park, that's geared at them. So we don't have to solve all problems with this, but some of those people will qualify for other developments in there. There's gonna be a longer timeline, but
Yeah, no. A lot of times, and I don't know how many, like just saying it for anybody who's watching, but what happens when you're looking for Section 8 housing and say you're in Detroit or Adrian or whatever, your agent is gonna be looking all over the state to try and place you. So this isn't, a lot of people who live in Ypsilanti, they're gonna be able to go there, but it's also the other people, but the demographic that we're talking about of people being priced out predominantly aren't already on housing vouchers, so there's really not a lot we can do to help other than trying to keep rent prices stable and taxes stable so that other rent doesn't go up.
Mhm.
Is
And
what I,
the city is not allowed to mandate whatsoever who can live in any unit ever. Because there have been way too many. This is where I would look for a lawyer. There's a lot of lawsuits and a lot of laws and a lot of litigation that's happening as well. To where cities and developers and real estate agents and everyone cannot restrict in any way.
Mhm. So I just wanna to see if we have other direct questions about AMI, or if there's another proposal for Kyle to kind of price out around this. Or if, like, I wasn't sure, Tywin, if you were suggesting that, as opposed to trying to put like 20 more affordable units within the family housing, whether you were suggesting that it should be split between the family and the senior housing. And if that's the case, then maybe the mix in terms of the 40 to 50%, maybe that doesn't make sense.
So you're discussing taking, adding 20 units to the family from the seniors?
No, what I was just suggesting was making 20 more units like within the family unit, making 20 more of those. So 10 more at the 40% and then 10 at 50%.
So
Within the family unit.
Mhm.
So I was just thinking about, so within what's up here,
From the 60% or adding 20 more units?
I wasn't thinking about in terms of number of units. I didn't think that would be what we could, but I was saying of this 156 units,
Mhm.
making 10 more of those at the 40% AMI and making another 10 at 50%.
And taking those 20 from the 60%.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yes,
I think
yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. So taking 10, 10 more, so then taking 10 from that 140 total. Yes,
Taking 20 from the 140 total?
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. I would be interested in that, and I would be interested in also, yes, that's one scenario that I would like to see Kyle price out, and I would like to also see, what it would look like to have. I want to see if we can make this work with having some more of those 1-bedroom units available, particularly the 40% AMI.
Yeah, that was,
So the idea being so of the new 20 units, weight them more heavily towards, do more 1-bedrooms than other unit sizes, is that what I'm hearing?
yeah, and I'm not saying to put them all at 1 bedroom, right? I just am saying like to increase some more at that 40%. I would like to, But I don't know if that includes, I don't know if that impacts the pricing piece.
Yeah, I'm trying to think quickly how much that will impact, like if we did more 1-bedrooms. But I can look at.
And it doesn't even need to be like, I mean, right now it's two 1-bedrooms and 8 2-bedrooms and 6 3-bedrooms. It doesn't even need to be like, 8 of them are 1-bedrooms instead. It could be 6 of them are 1-bedrooms,
I understand. Yeah.
So can you run the numbers both ways with the proportions that you have now, with the 40s and 50s, and then shift
Yeah.
to the 1-bedrooms?
More heavily weighted.
Yeah, I will make it known to the room that the more we discuss this and the more I think about like what is available, like I'm not like entirely sold on increasing the amount of 1-bedrooms now that I think that's how the whole Section 8 process works. But yeah, I just wanted to vocalize that, but I can see, because this is and obviously we can talk about, but this is a percentage of the units that are affordable and then the rest are available to anybody.
No, all of these are
Everything
at
is all
60 or
Everything is
40.
income restricted.
Everything is in there.
There are only 308 units in the whole development.
Right.
There are 308 units in the entire development, yes.
So this issue of people that I know personally do not qualify for housing aid, so this is not going to help resolve that issue for them. It's strictly for income restricted individuals who, and I'm not saying that like those
But
people.
Melissa, actually, can I?
Yeah.
Sorry to chime in. If your friends make 40% AMI, they would qualify for these 40% units, regardless if they qualify for Section 8 or anything.
Mhm.
So as long as you can income qualify through 1099, through W-2s, pay stubs, things like that, you can prove that you make 40% AMI, which is $30,000-ish, depending on how many people. Then you
So if
can-
it's like one.
Yeah, so these are not restricted to only people on vouchers.
Oh.
This
okay.
isn't like a
No, this
public
is-
housing unit
Okay.
that is only,
But all of them will
With
be
the project,
available.
But they will be available.
We'll accept vouchers.
Yeah,
From,
and
yes.
we have to, and the other thing is that I'm assuming there's like a wait list process or, yeah.
That will happen, yeah.
So, yeah. And sometimes these wait list processes can be like 3 or 4 years, sometimes at certain places. So I think, so I'm a college student, a lot of people I know are college students, or they want to stay here and support. communities that they care about. Oh, go ahead.
Don't need to speak more in your life.
Oh, so like that is who predominantly represents my friend groups, but also other people who just live here. And a lot of them, I don't think are aware of these programs at all, and then just assume like, so if it's at 40% AMI, that's so much that, well, sorry. We calculated like, I calculated like you had to make 13 or something dollars an hour, so like what would your income need to be? If somebody can back that up and help me remember how much that is gonna be.
What $13 per hour would be for?
Yeah, so if you were, so in order to be at 40% AMI, And to qualify for this based on your income, I'm just curious, what would somebody's hourly wage need to be if they were working full?
Well, $14 an hour is 29,120, and that's essentially, so it's $14 an hour or less. to
Okay.
Qualify for the 40.
Yeah,
One person.
okay. And so what would happen to a person if they qualify and say they get a job that pays better?
Yeah, so I'm not a compliance expert if there's compliance issues, but long story short, I believe that there are ways for people to be able to stay for a certain period of time. You don't like get kicked out.
Yeah, no.
I don't know that it's perpetual, although I do think you have a long time you can stay
Mhm.
in a unit if you initially income qualify.
Yeah, because I think that, especially my generation, millennials and Gen Z, we're highly transient between jobs and we never know how much we're gonna get in the
Yeah,
next job. So, yeah,
I'd be happy to get you that answer if it helps.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know, but I do know that people, there are instances where people qualify and then their income increases and they continue to live there
yeah,
because they initially qualified and certified. I just had a thought, and I don't know if this, we were talking earlier about, Joe, you were mentioning some of the things that can't be done because of fair housing laws and things like that. You can't dictate who rents or who is allowed to rent somewhere. I wonder if maybe this violates that too. Would we be allowed to open leasing somehow to like Ypsilanti residents, I don't know, 30 days before it gets open to the general public, and at least give people an opportunity before.
So we've done a lot of research on this, and Carl, please pick me, step in at any moment, but I believe you are allowed to target promotion
Mhm.
ahead of time.
Mhm.
But you are not allowed to, if anyone else finds out, obviously, you
Mhm.
cannot
Mhm.
restrict. You don't have to blast it out on every social media network. This housing development is coming on board.
Mhm.
And we're working on that for some of our other developments going on right now, of how to target specific areas.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you can't restrict.
Mhm.
You can target, not restrict.
Yeah, so there's, I don't know, are you familiar with the fair housing protected classes?
Yes.
Okay, so it's like, any way that it could be interpreted as being unfair. So for example, if you only marketed this to college students and that's the only place you saw listings, it might not say like, it might not have the stereotypical, great for college students, like if you had completely fair language, but you only posted it to certain areas like college campuses, and there could be a case made of a fair housing violation that you're marketing. And that's just like one thing.
I was just trying to think, I was thinking about a way to slightly
Yeah.
alleviate the concern about.
I appreciate that, Tywin, and then I would like to see if we can move to the next.
Yeah.
I was just gonna note that it's 8:30,
Yeah, okay.
and I think we're only on the AMI calculation.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we chose to do that one first. so
Yeah.
it would be a big conversation.
And I think it's been good. I just was like, I feel like we're not bringing new, I think we like have talked this one through and I'd like to move to the next one. That's good? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So then we were gonna talk about hiring practices. So I don't know if anybody had any particular things on that. I know Joe sent us some information as well in terms of some of the current contractor, like folks that we have.
Can I add two quick things to that?
Mhm.
So I believe it was Alyssa who brought up the union trades, people and getting a list of those individuals. Was that you?
No, I didn't bring up union. My concern was.
Oh, it was Tiffin? Okay. That has been a lot harder than I had anticipated, and I have calls into all of the union groups, and I've been told I will be hand delivered hard copies of these lists. I have not gotten any. And it was funny, the guy who I talked to was like, yeah, we'll get that right over to you, we'll email it. And then he's like, wait, it's gonna take longer and it's not gonna be emailed. So I'm working on compiling that, I have nothing. The second thing is, and this was, I pulled the contractors in the city. And in going through them, 3 out of the 18 contractors are actually a certain large landlord that we don't need to discuss who's located on Washington Street. And then one is Barnes and Barnes, and so a lot of the contractors are actually just the property management companies themselves, or very, very, very bad tenants. We have a lot of really good trades positions, so electric, plumbing, heating, cooling, all of that. But there's I say a lot of it. There's like 6 really good ones that are well known in the city. And then most of our actual building contractors specialize in historic rehab, which is not what this is. So working on this, Christopher has helped me out greatly in kind of researching this, because you would be shocked at the little amount of info that we've been able to find, because the state just gives you a list of everyone in the Ypsilanti area, and then you have to kind of go through voter records to figure out where they live. It was we've gotten down to 18. We're still doing a little bit more investigation, finalizing the list. It's going to be very helpful for us in the city, but it was shocking to me the little amount of builders, and most of them, some of them are like cabinet makers, which it doesn't really, it would kind of qualify, but not really if it's a single cabinet making person. So you'll be getting that. This is not ready to go out, but it was definitely very interesting. We knew that there was not that many. But some of the ones that you will see in town actually aren't even registered contractors. So they might have signs saying they are, but they are not. So anyways, that's my little 2 updates on what I'm trying to get you. I know that there is a 48-hour window of when I have to get you information. I just don't have all of it ready. So I'm working on it. And if you have any questions, please let me know. But we will get the trades when I can get them. Then I'm gonna figure out if they're actually city residents. But
This is helpful. I mean, that's good to know. I think that's helpful, and I think that would be really important and helpful, especially as we look at different kind of developments, especially ones that are not affordable housing and different things like that too. Because I think like would be a big benefit to be increasing. So how do we think about apprenticeships and things like that? In order to really be growing the base of providers in the city. And so, yeah, I think that would be helpful just in general overall.
I would also ask that as you're doing this, I don't know if you're just looking for people within the city of Ypsilanti, but if you find people who are in immediately adjacent townships, noting that would be worthwhile, because I mean, a lot of these kinds of labor, this kind of labor, I know, I have a bunch of friends who've done landscaping, and all of those landscaping jobs are located in townships outside of the cities that they live in.
Yeah, I also just want to say, like, being local is like not a huge priority. Like, trying to keep it local, yes, but it's like it needs to be somebody local. Like, yeah, it could be somebody local, but it could be they who shall not be named. Like, that doesn't matter to me. I'm looking for someone that has fair hiring practices, and for me, my own personal agenda with that is being able to hire sons and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate you bringing that up, but I also just want to say, I don't know what everybody else's priority is, but like, being local is not like the top priority. I just know it's how
It's not mine either. I care more about like,
Yeah, I know that's how you're collecting information, and that's difficult to collect, so I appreciate that. I'm not like, oh, I don't care. It's like, that's really awesome that you're doing it, but I just want to let you know.
the CBO actually does talk about local hiring, so that's why I stuck with that. The problem with going to the local surrounding townships is we're talking about thousands of actual former and current registered contractors, and there's no way for the staff of 4 we have to actually parse that info.
Right.
Landscapers are not registered contractors, so we don't have any way of actually, there's not a landscape registration.
That's fine. No, I was just using that as.
Yeah, but so it's really hard. So really it's just the trades and building, but
Yeah,
we will get you the information as much as we can. We won't be able to get the surrounding areas as much as you might think, just because of staff time. But we will try to get you the best list we can. And we'll definitely get you the full county union lists.
Okay.
That's one thing we're gonna do.
theoretically, just throwing this out here, if we were to decide as part of this, agreement that we proposed, and you guys were like, sure, if that works, we'll agree to it. If we were to say that we wanted there to be both within the contractors hired to build this development and also the property management that you hired to run this development. If we said that we wanted them to have fair hiring practices and hire people with felony charges on their records, would that be something that like you guys could devote that kind of staff hours to finding the right people to do that?
Well, if it was for the contractor, I would probably lean on the general contractor to find those people, because I don't have the.
But in terms of, I mean, it's like you would, before you inked the deal with the contractors, you'd say, hey, you guys.
I would talk to them about whatever it was that you were asking and make sure that we could deliver on it.
Yeah.
Or make sure.
Yeah.
Same thing with property
Yeah,
management.
and I'm not even
Okay.
saying like you need to hire felons, it's like the job opportunities are so limited, the fact that you would allow them to be hired.
Yeah.
And then it's also an issue of, yeah, we hire felons, but we still run a background check and then we still make it, because that's the way it works in housing, is that like, you can't deny somebody based on a felony, but you can make your own decision about it based on the information you get, and then like that's final for the most part. So it's just about like, not like you need to hire felons, like it needs to not only allow felons to be hired, but also have practices that doesn't exclude them. Be like, yeah, we're okay. And I'm not saying like they have to be all felons, there's certain transgressions that are a little bit more concerning, but that's just my priority. I don't know if we're on the same page.
Would you guys mind?
I don't,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Finish right here. I was just gonna ask if you could bring me up to speed a little bit on this one, because I don't know that it sounded like there were some emails. I'm not sure if I have all the background on the discussion. Well, I thought she emailed asking for contractor lists, but
That was a request at the last meeting. that they-
Okay,
they
maybe I
requested
didn't-
the first
maybe
meeting.
I didn't hear.
Yeah.
Maybe I just missed it at the last meeting. So the discussion about fair hiring practices is specifically hiring. Would we be open to hiring individuals with criminal backgrounds? and-
that's something that is often excluded from other sorts of fair, you know, like, okay, we don't want to discriminate based on race or sex or gender or whatever, but yeah, often criminal backgrounds are left off of those kinds of lists, and it makes it really hard for people to reintegrate into society when they literally can't get a job.
And we have such a high like population here that I agree, like I would love to see language that's not just about like, oh yeah, sure, like they can apply, but that there can be some support in terms of thinking about connecting, you know, this is another one of those things that can also be done in coordination with some organizations that also do work to help support folks to reintegrate and reentry, and also support with job pieces. So there's things like a brighter way, and you know, anyway, I know that we can't necessarily name orgs, but there are orgs, and I would say this would be a great opportunity to name, you know, working with an org, you know, working with some orgs that would actually help to support, you know, that could actually help to support folks, okay, thank you, who are formerly incarcerated and have felonies on their.
So that could look like, for example, the people managing this project, finding these organizations locally and making connections with them and saying that this is a project that we're doing that has these kinds of jobs available, like please for the, you know, I don't know if it's like case manager, but what, you know, whatever that relationship is, like, you know, make these known to the people who you're trying to serve, that we'd like them to apply, that kind of a relationship.
Yeah, because the thing is, you also end up with places like, yeah, we'll hire felons, but don't tell anybody about it. It's like, they do hire felons, but you really have to hunt to find them, because they were like, we do it, but we don't really advertise it. So yeah. and
Can I
then-
ask? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Is this the right time to ask about the amount of staff that's going to be long-term as like with the grounds crew or the maintenance crew?
I think so.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that, because I did talk with who our soon property management company would be. I'll just say that, but so a couple things. I expressed discussions that we had and some of the concerns about adequate staffing. And first of all, I was a little bit wrong in what was proposed from the start. But then we also were able to talk about how some of the maintenance staff staffing could be updated. What we're planning to do now is have 2 full-time maintenance staffers per project. So one, and that covers your grounds, everything exterior, but and also the interior. So we would have, 2 full-time maintenance per project. And then the remaining staffing is each project would have a full-time community manager and a full-time assistant. So it'd be 4 full-time employees per development or full-time.
Can I just say, I like this. I'm not saying that like,
Speaking to
we're going, but I like.
Speaking to the mic, so,
Oh, sorry, I like that proposed structure.
sorry, just a dumb question.
No, you're fine, like I literally have hearing aids in, so I don't know why I'm so bad about this. I also just assume I'm louder than I am because of that. But I like that proposed structure regardless of who management ends up being. So I'm curious as to how other people feel about that.
When you say project, is that each project is the site, so like
Yeah,
the ones that.
4 per family, 4 per senior. Yeah.
I also
that-
just want to say that I really like I just want to endorse figuring out how to get the word out to the right people ahead of the other people if we can. I think I like that idea.
I do too.
For hiring or for releasing?
For releasing applications to move in.
Mhm.
I think that, I'm not going to solve it in this moment, but I think that can be done with sort of, I guess, creative marketing or focus.
Thoughtful. Yeah.
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 Maybe I'm saying that. I think that can probably be accomplished.
Yeah, thanks for looking into that.
I think you're right.
And regarding local, I've heard at the last meeting I did hear that local sounded like it was a priority for some people for local hiring, both for contractors and also for management staff. But it's always our preference to have local employee or local hires as well, both in the community and in the contractor base. It's better for multiple reasons. One of the issues we often run into is difficulty finding qualified individuals or qualified contractors or whatever we have, but we would prefer all else equal to have more local people employed at the development.
Cool.
I'm rearing to get into the management conversation.
Else, you have something?
Oh, we can skip the management one, let's do that.
Yeah, just because we're at
Yeah.
8:46. If everybody's okay, because I've been kind of the most outspoken about this, I just want to iterate again. I do not feel good about Dan's management. I don't care who hears it. And again, with the issue of it being local, when it comes to management, property management companies, I know that it's a little bit harder because of the scope of the property management. It's a big thing. And for me, it's like locality is not nearly as important as having ethical property management and somebody that is really committed to the mission and vision of the developer, of the committee, and of everybody. So I actually did a little bit of research about what property management companies are around, and there are like nationally established nonprofit property management companies in several states. I'm not saying this is the one that I want, but just from like 5 minutes of research, there was an organization. And the other thing you run into is a lot of them specialize specifically in disability housing, senior housing. So you have to find one that's familiar with it. And of course, I need to research, but for example, there is this group called Mercy Housing Management Group, established in 1983, and they currently manage over 300 properties serving 22,500 affordable apartment homes in 21 states, including Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Nebraska, North Carolina, Ohio, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Wisconsin, and Washington. And they say at each property we manage, we hold true to our operating objectives, which include, let's see here, It's just standard stuff, maximizing financial results, maintaining property to owner standard, creating and sustaining work environment for employees, delivering superior customer service. So again, I'm not saying this is what we need to do, but it didn't occur to me that there are organizations out there like this that have a known history, that are nonprofits of managing low-income development and property. So I just want to present that to you guys.
I think that is something that, I mean, they're gonna have to hire people locally to manage this property if they don't have people
Right,
here
right.
to do it. So there would be people here on the ground doing that management work. If you were able to find a national nonprofit property management company that you guys would be willing to work with. But given that there is local knowledge of KMG not doing well by seniors in affordable housing, I think that's something I would like to look into also.
Yeah, we mentioned it, and I think Kyle written it down. I don't know if I can send the article to Kyle, I'm allowed to do that, but basically there was an MLive article. Sorry, there was an MLive article that covered KMG's treatment of senior housing in Ann Arbor, and it was very recent and not an ideal outcome for the tenants at that location. And to me, that's like a mark against trust. And I'm not saying that there's another management property would be better, because obviously we have worked with them. But if somebody is local and they have a proven track history of their values not aligning with our values, then it's worth looking at someone else, even if they're not local.
Was it condition of the apartments or what became, I mean?
So it was that basically, from what I understand, is that there was a contracted period of time for these units to be affordable. And then once that time expired, they basically increased rent, and that resulted in an extreme displacement of tenants that had been there decades, like 20, 30 years, and they did not seem to care whatsoever that they were displacing people that were at this point at the end of their lives and displacing them by increasing the cost of rent.
Do you know if the rent just went immediately to market rate?
What was that?
Do you know if the rent immediately went to market rate?
From what I understand, so basically there is an affordable amount that is set that seniors and people on fixed income are giving. It basically, what they did is they priced it just outside of that, just enough to be able to say that, like, you know, our rent rates are low, but it was just enough to be able to push people out. They're like, we're on a fixed income, we can't do this. I can send people the article so they can make their own decision.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at this, you're talking about, is Courthouse Square?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Courthouse Square, yeah.
Well, I guess the only thing, the reason I was wondering was because that sounds like something that was done at the direction of an ownership group, not that KMG was out, you know, obviously they're doing what they were asked to do under the management contract. But that sounds more like potentially an ownership issue.
It was
where
once they
KMG was able to, had to be the face of it.
So what I'm reading here is that it looks like it changed hands, and once KMG purchased it, they increased the rent.
KMG is not, they're not an owner, it's somebody else must be. I just want to draw a distinction between what a management company does, which really should, it's directed by the owner. A lot of this is directed by the owner. So I just want to be careful
Yeah.
calling KMG something that they're not.
And KMG, in full disclosure of everyone, is the Housing Commission's provider for managed property management. So they manage all of the Housing Commission's properties in the city.
And Break, I've heard poor things about it.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah, if you look at those
In the
Google
city.
reviews, that's rough.
No, say it.
No, I didn't understand a word that you said. In the city of
Yeah, so in the city of Solani, all of our Housing Commission properties are managed by KMG Prestige. Every
Yeah.
one of them.
And that property that we were just talking about, it's owned now by Redwood Housing. So that's like the owner. And then KMG
But K-
Prestige is the property management.
Do they do a good job?
No, not
No.
these Google reviews.
At the housing commission, I think it depends on the property and depends on a lot of things. It also depends on who the person in the office at that time is. With anything, I mean, you know, I'm only as good as my staff, you know, at the city of Ypsilanti, but they're only as good as their leader. And so, but we're only as good as our city council,
Right.
right? And so there's a lot of accountability actions that happen, but and talking to many people that have used KMG in the past, there's a lot of people who really like what they do, but they also say, look, a property management company is only as good as the owner. So basically, KMG doesn't set rents. KMG doesn't set collection practices. They don't set these things. They
Yeah, but they're
basically-
responsible for maintenance and stuff like that, right? Like all the upkeep of the apartments and stuff.
They are, but all of that's budget. So if an owner sets an unrealistic maintenance budget and KMG is trying to spread dollars that need to be spread thin, that could be what you're hearing if. And
So wait, so who is the owner? Who would be owner? Wouldn't that be you guys for this place or?
in this case, it would be, yes, we're the owner. But I'm saying if you're hearing about KMG issues at other properties, that KMG doesn't alone set the budget for repairs and maintenance, for example. They should have a hand in that, but they're implementing a budget, for example, when that happens. I don't know what the repair and maintenance issues are that KMG is
Mhm.
that involved with.
It sounds like it's not to say that all of the blame necessarily has to be with KMG, it could be the owners, right? Like that the owners could be creating, could be are likely part of the
Well,
problem.
especially in an instance of converting something to market rate housing, that was certainly a new owner purchased it, that was the direction. I'm not sure how that was accomplished. But anyway, that's an owner direction.
Gotcha.
So before, just because I'm looking at time and I know that this conversation is not gonna be over in 8 minutes, can we just extend maybe, I don't know, 9:30?
I'm gonna do
9:15,
like 15, 9:15.
9:20?
I would like to do 9:30.
We can end as
about
early,
that.
if we can end whenever, but this way we only have to extend once maybe.
Yeah, we don't have to go to 9:30.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say let's go to
Yeah.
9:30.
Okay,
I would like to be done as soon as we, but I don't wanna cut off things, I just wanna get this done before we jump.
yeah, okay.
And talking to Kyle and then listening to what you're saying and even talking to Mr. Barr here, because Carl, please correct me, Roy, I don't know if we can actually limit what contractors they use. But what we can do and what we should do is actually ask for a list of things to be put in the agreement to make sure if KMG is the group, or if another property management company is the group hired, that they have to meet certain specific benchmarks. Because really, who manages it is not as key as making sure the maintenance is taken care of. And making sure that the rent is noticed properly, I believe.
The other thing that often gets overlooked in management is.
Wait, sorry, we did not extend our.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Motion to extend to 9:30?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Okay, so
Thank you.
what I was in the middle of saying is that one thing that often gets overlooked, and I just say this in my background, property management, okay, rent prices, okay. Disabilities, individuals with disabilities, and I can't speak entirely out of my experience because, whatever. Individuals with disabilities often get overlooked in management settings, especially, and not just individuals with disabilities, individuals impacted by issues of fair housing. But that, based on just anecdotal knowledge, has been an issue with property of like, I need reasonable accommodation, and it becomes an issue, it becomes battle with like, okay, well, we want this and this documentation. It's like, okay, well, that's actually not what you can ask for. And I just, again, anecdotally, so I would be interested in having, if KMG is still on the table, interested in having a conversation with them. What are your practices for accommodating individuals with disabilities in your properties?
Can I just,
Okay.
just in terms of, because I think when, for like the next meeting, what I would like to really focus on is, and what I think that we're supposed to do is, as part of the CBA, right, is that we are laying out those kind of
Right, right.
guidelines. So what I would like us to be doing, right, is like within these categories, to be laying out, here's what it looks like, right? So, but I think last time we talked about that, part of this is like, there's things that we can look at, what is the asset management team and their relationship with the property manager? What are things that we want to make sure that's laid out?
Right,
Which could be around some of these things around,
right.
when people are making requests for, to add different components to make it more accessible, what are the, like, I think there's a couple of things we've talked about.
Right.
And so
And they've
that we will be laying that out.
yeah, and they've clarified that in a way that I'm like simmering down a little bit, but I'm still like,
You let this finish, I'm sorry, I wanted to see it.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, like, so what I would love for us to do and for a focus, because that's what the agreement is, so that we can kind of say, like, here's the things under these categories. And this is what we want to see, as opposed to kind of like at this point, I mean, like, I don't know that we need to like keep asking people, like, what do you do? We just need to say this is what we want to see, and then go from there. And then there'll be some things where they're like, oh, wait, this is easy. We already do this. Great. Oh, this is easy. That's great. But I think that that's where we get into that back and forth and that negotiation of, here's the things that are really important. Here are things that we'd like to know more. Here are things that are not, look, there's no cost to this. This is just about quality of life, And so I think what I'm hoping that we can focus on that next meeting will be that. And I think we can bring all of these in and say, here are the issues that we know of that we want to control for, right? By having direct language within what we put forward. But I think that that's very reasonable, right? It's very reasonable to say that people should be able to request accommodations and not feel intimidated and not feel like there's going to be a cost, because I have heard that in different spaces that is an issue, so that people don't get their accommodations. But I think that is very reasonable for us to put in, and to talk about.
Yeah, you put that beautifully, thank you. But so yeah, I appreciate you illuminating the role of it and listening, hearing me out, and I appreciate that really putting that into words in a way that is concise and also makes sense to me. So I would say I agree with that, and I appreciate that.
If, just for efficiency for the next meeting, I would suggest that each committee member bring 3 benefits that they would like to see negotiated. And then actually, let's just talk about those benefits at next meeting. And then see if that we can do that or not, just so we can focus on the actual agreement in the next 2 meetings.
That sounds like a great idea. I'm into that.
Well, I think that we have some things, because I think one of the pieces, which is this last page here, like this, and I think it still covers most of what we've been talking about. This was like the list of all the different things that we had talked about.
Right.
But in these categories, I can't remember who had asked for it to be like, maybe it was you, Lisa, because you sent some more of this too, and I didn't have a chance to kind of look at the list you had to see if everything that was in this grid covered those things.
It's like a Venn diagram sort of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I tried to do it.
I love that.
Writing it, like, and so the hope was that, and if this does cover it, I want to just make sure I haven't looked to see if there's things that we talked about today yet. Some of these things we've already talked about, and but then one of the reasons I wanted to prioritize them is that there's some things that might fall off. Like if we can like really push up this thing, then this might not be, we might not be able to get this piece too, because, and also like the things that are like how we can get a sense of what things are like high cost or things that are like low cost or no cost, things like that. Because then we can really focus in and like get at the language of them, because I think.
So this agreement is only as good as how you write it.
Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to like be able to like kind of get at more of that, like, and today, like, for instance, like the AMI stuff, I think we like talked through that a lot and got some really good specifics, and then I think it's just gonna be like the calculations and what that looks like in the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it would be good, and even if we could go through here and say, oh yeah, you know, this isn't, you know, whatever, or we want to get a sense of how possible is this, et cetera, like easement agreement, like, you know, is that possible? Is there a big cost to that? Or no, you know, those are the kind of things I would like to kind of get a sense of.
Are we thinking maybe kind of looking at this list and kind of like divvying it up for each of us to focus on and like what? I'm just trying to look for clarification for that you propose.
I'm not proposing anything. I was just saying, if the committee would like, it could each go home, each member bring back 3 for the next meeting, but if you want to work from this list, that's fine as well. I would like to see this committee move towards creating that agreement. These first 2 meetings have been more about gathering information, so the next 2 should be about creating that agreement with final adoption at that last meeting.
Oh, do we have 2 more? Why did I think
Yeah, one more.
I think we only have 1 more, Andrew.
Yeah.
Today? Oh,
Yeah.
wait, no. Oh,
2
wait,
in
no.
April.
Oh, wait, we're not in April yet, y'all. We do have the 6th and the 21st. Thank you. I don't know why I thought we were already in our
I
3rd
also thought
meeting.
that too, I don't know
Oh,
why.
you know what? Because we had that one that was before we put this list together. So we really have 5 meetings, not 4. Okay. That's what it is. Thank you. Well, I think that gives me a little less like anxiety in terms of what we need to do exactly.
I'm 2 meetings is not a long time.
No, it's still not a lot of time.
Still better.
We need to be I think we need to be a lot more focused in our next meeting.
But I think that we are getting more so that we learn different things and it's prioritizing.
Yeah, I think it's good to like, because that's what the purpose of the open meetings act for, is right? So like, if we did all of this on our own time, it would like not be very ethical, or like the public would really see what we were trying to prioritize. I am curious, like, I like the idea of like doing some work at home, and also am curious what that would look like in combination with this very useful little Venn diagram table here. Because I don't, like, for this agreement, do we have to write up the actual language, or can we just be like, this is what we want, let's put it in like fancy lawyer speak?
So you guys come up with your recommendations, and then Mr. Barr's office actually drafts the agreement to make sure that everything is legal. Just based on the time constraints, this group will not see that agreement. However, your list that we're going to create to give to Mr. Barr's office and the agreement will go to the council at the same time.
Great.
So, and the Mr. Barr's office doesn't shy from what is recommended. There's just sometimes certain
Yeah.
ways of working.
Definitely. We wouldn't want to accidentally put something in it.
I'm very glad that Mr. Barr's office will be writing the legal language of this.
Yeah, I think we just want to give like, right, the structure, the bones of it, you know, and then feel really clear on that. So.
I just wanted to remind people that there is possibility in the CBO for extensions for these things, not that we want to brush up against that, but if it does come down to that, if in the next couple meetings, we get that all lined up, but then this part of the office takes a while to do that, that can be requested by us or by COG to extend that.
So popping back to the useful little list here, like some of these I feel like could be, I don't know, some of these could maybe exist as they are, like with some detail. And some other of these, it seems like would probably need, if we wanted to include all of these, or go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I just want to quickly say, I did take a moment to go actually out to the site and look at that easement drop off. And now I completely understand why it's such a concern. And I actually was like, I don't think anybody should be able to access that. Like, that's a major, like, somebody could fall down. There's not easy emergency access. It's completely undeveloped. So I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to go.
I thought that was iterated at the last meeting.
I just want to say, like,
I no longer have any sort of desire for there to be water.
yes.
No.
So
yeah,
I just wanted to clarify that
okay.
because I know Alex was like, let's work on this list, and I was like, okay, I just want to make it clear that, like, I almost think that should be fenced off and restricted just because of how.
I don't think I don't think that's on
It's
this
not
list.
on the list. Yeah, the easement agreement was at a different place, and that was in terms of thinking about the connection with Penny Park. And that there would need to be multiple, but if within this site, it could start off, but that would be, Something
We
that-
have to go through another property. We have to
Yeah.
go From this property.
Right. Yeah.
so that was just like, I just had it on here because it was just one of the.
Right,
things
because it's a
that-
broader,
Yeah.
community benefit, yeah. But so I just want to put that out there that I didn't really understand what was like being discussed last meeting, because I didn't really conceptualize it until I actually walked over there and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
That is kind of scary looking.
Alice, for you,
Yeah, just, so if we wanted to include all of these, it seems like a thing that we could do would be, we do divide it up and maybe each of us take 2 or 3 items and sort of detail what we would want. Or we could just pick things from this, we could pick. Cause I feel like even though we've talked a bunch, I still don't have a sense of how like reasonable all of these things are to ask, if we just. And I guess maybe some of that would depend on like the details of these things, like there's something on here, it says electric appliances instead of gas, like that doesn't seem like that needs a lot of detail, but something like. Property management, relationship accountability would be like a thing that needs more detail, yeah.
yeah, I'm just wondering, because I feel like I would like to have a little bit better sense, could we just kind of, go down this, because I want to get a sense from Kyle in terms of, because a lot of these, right, this is not like new things, but if we can get a sense of like already viability and also sense of like cost, like high cost, low cost, that would be helpful. And then I think that'll make it easier for us then to know and to say, like, as you're saying, Alice, like things that are like, okay, we know we need to come, or we know we're gonna need to like put more detail here as opposed to this, so that we can identify where we need to focus our attention. But if we could just kind of go through it and then also see if there's other things that aren't captured here, that would be great, because this was just based off of my notes that I just scribbled. Okay. Okay, so just starting at benefits for people living at development, so upkeep, maintenance, street presence. So we talked about that a lot, and I think that some of what we've talked about today in terms of staffing might get to some of that. Are there specific things that people would want to talk about in that? Or Kyle, do you have anything to add from that that's different from what we've already talked about?
Can you
I don't
read that again, Des? Sorry, Kyle.
So this was for the upkeep, maintenance, street presence.
Thanks.
I don't have any, anything to add. I think what this was initially intended was to make sure that the development's properly maintained over the life of the development. And if that is what that is, that's, we're aligned. We have that, so I think this is, the language can be figured out, but I think this is.
And the city already has ordinances, I think, that would address, unkeptness. Tall grass, But anyway, so I'm just, so that feels like something that we don't necessarily need to like dial into. Do people feel satisfied on that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so electric appliances, I know this was in part in terms of thinking about energy preparedness, like resilience in some ways in terms of electric appliances. And then I know I also mentioned this in terms of accessibility, specifically, especially within the senior homes. So I don't know if there's other things around that. And I know you were gonna look into it because you were saying that there was some reasons why y'all, do gas and not electric.
Typically, yeah, so the typical setup would actually be mostly electric. The exception would be heating in, in the Midwest, it's very common to heat with gas. And that's twofold. The first is historically, and even now, the cost of gas, although rising, electricity is rising too, gas heating is cheaper as a utility cost. The gas appliances are more ubiquitous, so there's a lot more options for gas appliances. So the cost of buying gas appliances is also low. So it's really twofold. And so if there's a strong preference from the committee to, actually it would be two, it'd be water heat and it would be heat, like furnace heat would be the 2 gas utilities. If there's a strong preference or desire to investigate all electric and the cost impacts, I can do that. I haven't dug into exactly what it would cost, but those are the cost drivers, and that's why we typically heat with gas.
And I could see like heating, especially if there's not a solar array to cover, for instance, like on the property. But then thinking about like electric stoves as the appliance. So, I mean, I don't know like what that would look like, but I feel, and that's something too, maybe it would make more sense to, I'd have to talk to a couple more folks.
Yeah, and that was just a brief concern that I had raised, because like if your electricity gets knocked out, are we making sure that seniors and families are still staying warm and having hot water throughout any sort of electrical outages? Kyle said there is a generator, and then I was still like concerned, like, is that, so that I feel like maybe a little more research. And also Steve, you were about to say something.
I was gonna say that the city of Ypsilanti has signed on to the 820 agreement that was put forth through the city of Ann Arbor in terms of achieving carbon neutrality. And this is why I brought this up, is so the more electric appliances that we can install in this, the closer we are to reaching that goal. And so achieving carbon neutrality has been a goal for the region and for the city as well. So as we go through that and looking at the greenhouse gas emissions every year, I mean, this is a prime example of a new development that we can make that change. And going back to older developments and older buildings and older housing stock, it's hard to switch that over. But going forward with this, that would be an easy thing to do. If there's a backup generator, then that takes care of some of it. If we're dealing with gas, just with heating element of that, and water heaters and things like that, there are options for real-time water heaters where they're using less energy. They're on-demand water heaters rather than just a tank that's sitting there with hot water and it wasting energy. So there are other ways to get around that. So that's kind of what I was thinking in this regard.
All right, so this looks like one that we can come back to. Maybe I like the connection with the carbon neutrality. I'm happy to commit to talking, but anybody could obviously, but to try to talk to a couple other like senior, some folks, because just to kind of verify, in terms of thinking about why that could be important. Because I also think about as it ages, like I have like an old, I like gas, I prefer it because I was like, ooh, I know the fire's there. But then what happens as it gets older, it starts leaking more too. And so that actually also it impacts like the indoor air quality as well, which I'm noticing now, which is why I'm like, I have to make moves to electric because
I can just share a little bit. The stoves would be electric. That's the plan, is that the stoves here would be electric.
Oh, okay.
Just so you're aware of that. It would really just be for your furnace and your water heater, but those will be the gas appliances.
I would be interested in having more information from you guys about what it would look like to be all electric. Yeah.
And also, I don't know, what was your plan on research? Because I'm interested in just doing broader research about like developments that have done this. I wasn't sure what your research approach was going to be best.
Oh, I was just gonna talk to some people on the street and say, hey. That's the way I do it. I'm like, hey.
It's not like, it's not like.
Do you? It's not so. It's not.
I don't know, I just want to be mindful of time.
It's not like you, like, I do this and you do that, like, only I do the electrical, but I'm interested in looking at this from a broader ecology standpoint, and if you're interested in talking to people on the street about it, like.
Yeah, I'm fine if we're talking about like the appliances, so we can, like the oven, like that was the main thing that I was thinking about. And then I love it to be fully, so, come back with some ideas for that. But I don't think that we need to necessarily hang on that one as much.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of time. We still have like 10 more things to get through on here. We just spent like 15 of them talking about the electric or gas. So I think I feel an amount of anxiety about the time that we are spending on these things. I would like to keep moving.
Okay.
Yep.
So resident tenant committee, which I know we've spent a lot of time talking about, and I think for that, there were some like ideas about what that could look like. That I think would be good for us to come with or to talk about, to kind of build out more language around. I don't know if there's anything else we have to say about that.
I agree, Des, and I put some, a little bit of language in what I shared earlier, but I'll bring that back and I would be happy to think a little bit more about that as well in between.
Thank you. Great. Property management relationship accountability, which I think we talked about a lot today, and that is a clear area where we'll want to put some language to some of those things specifically, but that's something we will kind of focus in on.
Are you open to like me just starting to research how, like, just the broadest language that I would like to, like, we would like to see included?
Yeah,
Okay, that can be my number 2.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm just like,
I'm not writing down one yet.
I am just like, I'm just trying to get it through.
yeah, I'm just highlighting, yeah, because then some of these we'll just focus on first, in terms of getting some language. And then I'm gonna skip both. No, let's go to both. Let's just go in order. So things that could be for both. So one of the things we talked about, the on-site tutoring activities for children. So I don't know if you had some more in that conversation about things like that.
I did, and also with our asset management team, because that's really more owner led. And our head of asset management, who's relatively new with our company, but comes with a background of resident engagement. She's the one who had the concept about the resident tenant committee, or sorry, the engagement committee. We are definitely working on this in other properties as well, like having both apartments specific but broader community engagement with, be it, local nonprofits, Meals for Wheels, food pantries, things like that. And so we would certainly be open to that here and we can talk more about those specifics.
I can work on the language for both of those things.
Great, thank you.
I would love to also do that, and then we can combine them together.
It's for the food pantry, free store piece too, is when you say both of those
Yep,
things.
so I'm
Yeah.
down to work on outside, talking about, just incorporating basically benefits for these folks, for people in the community space or something.
Great. Thank you. All right, and so we talked more affordable units. We talked about that extensively today, so we'll get some more information about that, but I think we're making leeway for that. So recycling pilot for large multi-unit households. So we kind of touched on that a little bit, because right now they wouldn't have recycling. So I mean, I don't know, like, I'm not gonna push this off the cliff.
I do have a friend that works in the county with waste management and recycling, so that's something I'm willing to look into. If people do want that, or if like people are like, let's not focus on it. So I'm just saying.
Well, I think the main thing would be whether, in terms of the cost for this and something that then the ownership would need to be taking on.
So, question based on what Joe said earlier, where larger apartments aren't eligible, is a pilot something that's ever been conceived of at the city level that we could look at? I just don't know what it costs.
So we have pilots right now at the city,
We-
level, but do not offer. Recycling.
No, what we're saying is like, not
Oh,
pilot.
sorry.
Yeah, I know.
It is a pilot.
I could,
Like, is this, because I know that's what the expansion now is supposed to be, is kind of like piloting this out.
I would kick that to Steve.
I was just gonna say, I can talk with Ron, and I can also talk with people at Recycling and Arbor to see what they're doing for the pilots that they've had. We've been talking about this in council for at least the last 3 years that I've been on it, to try to expand this in different ways. And it's always been focused on upgrading the single residence program, then moving out to that. So I can talk around about what it would take to have a development of this size.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know.
Oh,
Great, I put you down. I'm gonna be like sharing out everybody's thing. We already talked about targeted promotion, and so that's something Kyle will look into. Right, and then benefits for city at large, support for pedestrian crossing elsewhere in the city. And I put this example of North Huron because I almost get hit there like literally every day. So anyway, but I don't know, I didn't see when I went out to the site that there was like a specific space like right there that I would be like, oh yeah, that needs a really clear pedestrian crossway, but there might be something else, but I just want to like lift that. So thinking about,
Mhm.
you know, feasibility, if that's something too, that we can talk about more. Kyle.
I would also like to talk about in that sort of corridor-esque type conversation, just like corridor beautification right over there or along La Forge, trash cans even, and then what does it mean to sustain that? So as a larger community benefit.
Yeah,
You said around the forge, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like that sort of, you know, if I was living over there and walking into town, walking down there and there's a lot of like, people drive really fast, it's really bumpy, it's
Yeah.
downhill. So even safety considerations, but especially definitely comfort and trash.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would, yeah, that's great, Lisa, because I would definitely, you know, prioritize what's close to there and making it safe for adding more people than necessary. I mean, I do want to see, but like that would, you know, making a pedestrian, you know, whatever to make it pedestrian friendly in that area would be my preference. So I think we could ignore then like thinking about the pedestrian crossing elsewhere, but just thinking about maybe how to make sure that there's safety and beautification right in that space.
Yeah, that would be my vote. Yeah.
Okay.
Although, sorry, I'm no, so to have
You-
one.
Crossing right by the bridge there.
No, like going from like Riverside Arts Center into downtown.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, Expo.
pretty much every time I cross the space, like this could be it.
Yeah, so,
Easement agreement? We,
Wait, Lisa, were you thinking you
Oh,
might
okay.
do some more research on that part, or are you just vocalizing that?
Oh, so yeah, I can do more research. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, easement.
and then wait, and then Kyle, does that seem like something that seems reasonable for you?
I would want to know more about what you guys are asking for. I mean, and pedestrian crossings, when you're adding APS signals and traffic signals and things like that, and I don't know if that's what's being requested, but those costs add up pretty fast.
Yeah, okay.
Like an
Yeah,
intersection.
so the typical ones that the city's done has been 150 to 225,000. 150 to 200 for the crossings that we've had because of our old infrastructure, because of where everything is. They have been a very, very large cost on top of the fact that it's an MDOT right of way. That's right. Speaking of, the prices increase.
When I said hi, I wasn't thinking it was that high.
Oh, no, like that's not even like, that's not even like a joke. That's like literally what we call them hawks here. That's what our hawks have cost. I think the cheapest one has been 150.
where was that?
We have one over at AMU's campus, and we have one literally right down here to cross at the bridge. Those are the two that we've been able to do.
So by the water tower, right down.
Sorry, can I just clarify? That's new traffic, actually traffic lights with integrated automated pedestrian crossings, or what is?
Yeah, no, so they're. It's a lot easier to show you. Actually, we can walk on.
There's no traffic light at these places,
Yeah.
right? There's just a flashing light that goes over the road to say, stop when
But
the.
if there is lights, there is
Right, like if you're talking about when somebody pushes a button and it stops traffic. So it's like, cross. Yeah, those things, you've probably seen that.
Oh, I'm familiar. Sorry, I just, with the costs and. I was
So,
thinking there was like 4 traffic lights and APS.
but maybe based on what Lisa's talking about, and it wouldn't necessarily be just like that, but just like, you know, taking into account that people will be moving, like walking in that space where they're not necessarily now, because there's not as many people there.
I should add, so we have to go through the county to finish Clark Road. And we're taking it not quite up to La Forge, but we're affecting that Clark and La Forge intersection. The county, I don't know what they'll require yet, because that's behind our process a little bit right now. But they could require pedestrian upgrades based on the fact of what's happening here. I don't know. But that could come later, and the county is relatively stringent on things like that, so I would think that if there was a need to upgrade the pedestrian infrastructure, then that could be fleshed out in that conversation as well.
I just want to do a time check. It's 9:24.
Yeah, I was about ready to say, do you want a motion to that or? we
I
feel-
think that we're almost done. I think we can do it.
Okay,
Because we already, so we're at easement agreement, and so the question is whether, does that seem reasonable, seem like something that could be possible?
From regarding our property, if this is an easement,
Yeah, just for this, the city will have to do more work.
yeah. I think so. We're already providing an easement. I don't know if it's in this area or we need to figure out where it is, I guess, but
But that can be
I'm
more
open to it.
clarity,
I'm
so
open.
Steve, you can come with some more specifics about that,
Sure.
right? And then,
I'm open to that, as long as it's just us working within our own property. for
Mhm.
this discussion.
Yeah.
That's true.
cool. And then staffing, local formerly incarcerated amount, permanent staff, so we got more clarification about the number of staff. And I think that for us, it's about language in terms of making sure there's not only allowance, but also outreach for folks that are been formerly incarcerated.
yeah. Des, you seem a little bit more familiar with programs for integrating incarcerated folks, so I'm not sure if you want to look at the language of that, or if I can look at the language, or we could both.
Yeah, I'm happy to help with that too.
I have another benefit in here that I would like to ask Kyle that you guys look into, just to bring to our conversation next time. Because it might be completely insane, or you might be into it, which is LEED certification.
We are, so we are planning to certify to something called the National Green Building Standards.
Mhm.
That's not,
Mhm.
but it is another energy efficiency or green building certification. Yeah. So NGBS, National Green Building Standards, is what we're planning to certify.
Cool.
So can I talk to you after about LEED real quick?
Yeah, are you gonna spill some LEED tea?
I will talk to anyone about it, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
I would,
talk too much of this.
Oh, that's great. Are there any other things that we're missing or that we need to check in about more? Did this capture it all? Look at that, y'all.
Wow, it's pretty good, it's just there.
Yeah, so I think that, so when we come back, that we'll kind of go through these and kind of start working out some language for them. And I think it'll be good to probably just check in on the things that people are going away with and then come back, share that, and then we'll pass it forward. That sounds good for kind of proposed business.
Yep.
All right,
Good motion to something, end the meeting, is that?
Or gives you-
Adjourn, that's the word, motion to adjourn?
Support.
all in favor?
Aye.
So tell you what.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.